The story begins quietly, not with violence, not with chaos, but with memory. 2 years had passed since Vincent Asumbi was locked away, yet his presence still lingered in Lilian's life like a shadow that refused to lift. Even now, the salt-laced air of Mombasa clung to her memories, a phantom scent that followed her wherever she went. No matter how far inland she moved, no matter how carefully she rebuilt her life, the past remained, patient, heavy, unresolved. On the surface, Lillian's life had settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings began with the soft patter of Annie's bare feet on the wooden floor, the clink of spoons against ceramic bowls, the muted voices of children's cartoons filling the room. In the evenings, Annie slept curled against her chest, her steady breathing a fragile lullaby. This was the peace Lilian had fought for, clawed for, lied for. But beneath that calm surface, something trembled. The peace was fragile, a carefully built dam holding back years of fear, regret, and buried truth. And at the center of it all stood one place, Mombasa. The memory arrived suddenly, without warning. The heat came first, thick, suffocating, relentless. Not the warmth of comfort, but the kind that pressed against the skin and made breathing feel like work. The sun beat down mercilessly on dusty roads and rusted tin roofs. This was where everything had begun to unravel. Lilian saw herself then, younger, thinner, still hopeful. Annie was just a tiny bundle in her arms, crying, hungry, helpless. Vincent was gone, not just absent, gone. He had promised her a future, whispered dreams, beneath star-filled skies, spoke of stability, security, a life beyond poverty, but one morning he vanished. His side of the bed was cold, his bag was gone, no note, no explanation, only silence. Panic followed, then disbelief, then despair. Days blurred together as Lilian searched for him, called anyone who might know something. Annie cried for food, for comfort, for a father who would never return. And slowly the truth settled in. She was alone. Mombasa, once vibrant and full of life, became cruel in its indifference. The colors of the market mocked her. The laughter of children echoed like reminders of everything she had lost. She had nothing, no family, no support, only a child who depended entirely on her. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her chest until even standing felt exhausting. Annie's cries became reminders of her fear of failure, fear of hunger, fear of what would happen next. Mombasa nearly broke her, so she fled, not with a plan, but with instinct. Months later, Annabel entered Lillian's life when they met in a small, dusty community center where Lilian had hesitantly sought out resources for struggling mothers. Annabel, with her kind eyes and gentle smile, had been volunteering that day, her presence a balm to Lillian's frayed nerves. There was no pity in Annabel's gaze, only a quiet understanding that Lilian found disarming. They had fallen into conversation slowly, hesitantly, Lilian revealing only fragments of her story, enough to convey her desperate situation without drowning Annabel in the full, crushing weight of her past. Annabel, in turn, spoke of her own life, a narrative of quiet resilience and a deep-seated desire to help others navigate the turbulent waters of life. She spoke of her own struggles, subtle hints of past heartbreaks, and personal battles that had shaped her into the empathetic soul she was. It was this shared vulnerability, this unspoken recognition of shared human frailty, that formed the bedrock of their burgeoning friendship. Annabel didn't pry, a grace Lilian deeply appreciated. Instead, she offered practical support. She brought over bags of groceries. Her generosity, a silent testament to her compassion. She helped Lilian find a more affordable and stable apartment, a slightly larger space that finally allowed Annie her own little corner for toys and dreams. More importantly, Annabel offered her time, her presence. She would sit with Lilian, cup of tea in hand, listening with an unwavering attention as Lilian slowly began to unpack the emotional baggage she had carried for so long. There were afternoons spent watching Annie play, Annabel's quiet presence a comforting buffer against Lilian's anxieties. She never offered platitudes or easy answers, but simply bore witness to Lilian's pain. "You're doing so well, Lilian," Annabel would say, her voice soft but firm as they watched Annie chase a butterfly in the small patch of garden outside their new apartment. "You've built a life for you and Annie from nothing. That takes incredible strength," Lilian would nod, a lump forming in her throat, the words of validation a rare and precious commodity. Annabel's belief in her, when Lilian herself struggled to find it, was a powerful force. It allowed Lilian to see herself as a survivor. "He won't find you here, Lilian," Annabel said one evening, her hand resting gently on Lilian's arm as they watched Annie sleep, her face a picture of innocent repose. "You're safe, and you're stronger than you think." She was referring to Vincent's sporadic threatening phone calls over recent weeks. He threatened violence and threatened to take Annie away from Lilian. He was angry that, despite abandoning Lilian with an infant, she had been able to get back on her feet while his success had been tempered. He was convinced Lilian had spread rumors about him, leading to lost business deals. The fear of Vincent's return still gnawed at Lilian, but Annabel's steady presence chipped away at its power. She helped Lilian develop a safety plan, simple steps to take should Vincent ever reappear. The unease arrived before dawn. Lilian felt it before she heard anything. A familiar tightening in her chest, the kind of instinct born from years of surviving Vincent's moods. Then came the sound, a car, not just any car, low, expensive, deliberate. Her heart began to race. She peeked through the curtains and saw it, a sleek dark sedan parked across the street, a car that didn't belong there. Then she saw him, Vincent, standing calmly, watching. The world stopped. He had found them. Every precaution she had taken, cash payments, no digital trail, changed routines, all of it had failed. When he knocked, it wasn't loud at first. It was patient, testing. "Lilian," his voice came through the door. "It's me." Fear wrapped itself around her heart. Annie looked up. "Mommy, who is that?" Lilian forced calm, lied gently. The knock-on turned to banging. Demands replaced politeness. Vincent wasn't asking anymore. With no time left, Lilian grabbed Annie and moved to the window. The fire escape was rusted, dangerous, but it was the only way. The door splintered behind them. Vincent's rage filled the room. They climbed, slipped, scrambled, and ran. Down dark alleys, through shadows, away from him. But the peace was gone, forever. After escaping Vincent's unwelcome visit, Lilian hid with Annie in a cheap motel. She had devised a plan should Vincent ever show up to enact his threats. This was not what she wanted to do, but it had to be done. She contacted a lawyer friend, John Gumo, who knew a corrupt police officer willing to fabricate evidence. They would accuse Vincent of horrible things against Annie. There would be evidence and injuries, and Vincent would go to prison, leaving Lilian and Annie in peace once again. She looked at Annie as she slept. "I'm doing this for you, my love," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll protect you, no matter the cost." The gambit had begun. The sterile hum of the courtroom faded into an oppressive silence. as the judge's gavel fell, each percussive strike echoing the finality of a sentence. Lilian had both orchestrated and dreaded 12 years, a lifetime in the context of a child's upbringing, a gaping chasm in the years that would shape Annie's understanding of the world and of her father. Lilian had sat through the proceedings with a practiced stillness, a mask of detached composure, her gaze fixed on the polished oak of the barrister's table, never once meeting Vincent's eyes. He had looked surprisingly small, stripped of his usual swagger, the arrogance that had defined him. He was just a man, awaiting the pronouncement of his fate. The fabricated evidence had done its work. The whisper of child abuse had been enough to fracture his carefully constructed world, to sow seeds of doubt so potent that the legal machinery, once set in motion, had ground relentlessly forward. The image of Vincent's face, as the guards led him away, was seared into her memory. It was a look that haunted her. She had painted him as a monster, a perpetrator of crimes against his own child, and, in doing so, she had become a perpetrator of deceit. The legal system, in its corrupt, impersonal, efficient way, had dispensed its brand of justice, swift and unforgiving. But Lilian knew, with the certainty that chilled her to the core, that this was not the end of it. Her hands trembled as she lifted them into her line of sight. These were the hands that had forged evidence, the hands that had typed fabricated emails late at night, deleting and rewriting until every sentence sounded convincing, the hands that had signed documents that did not belong to her, dates that should never have existed. They no longer felt like her own. They felt criminal. She closed her eyes, hoping for escape, but found none. Vincent's face emerged from memory, unbidden and painfully clear. Not the distorted caricature she had taught herself to see. Not the monster she had described in courtrooms and police stations, but the man she had once loved, the man who laughed too loudly, who promised too much, who held her hand on the beach while the sun dipped low into the sea. The warmth of those memories was unbearable. Had she truly been protecting Annie, or had she been protecting herself? The question burned. Her justifications, his temper, his unpredictability, her fear began to unravel under scrutiny. Fear had given her permission to destroy a life. And in doing so, she had built another prison, one with no walls, no bars, and no release. Annie. Her daughter's name surfaced like a lifeline and a wound all at once. Annie slept peacefully down the hall, unaware that her entire foundation had been built on a lie, unaware that the father she had been taught to fear might one day be revealed as a victim, and that her mother, her protector, would become something far more complicated. Lilian pressed her palms to her face and finally allowed herself to cry. Not the controlled tears she had mastered over the years, not the silent ones she shed behind locked doors, but deep, broken sobs, the kind that tear through the chest and leave nothing intact. She had won once. She had outmaneuvered fear, danger, and abandonment, but this was different. This was the cost. And as the clock continued its merciless ticking, Lilian understood something with painful clarity. Some lies protect you, some lies destroy you, and some wait patiently until you have nothing left to give. What happens when the truth is revealed? What happens to Lilian when her lies unravel? Stay tuned for part 2.